This is a heater control valve for a 1988 Porsche 928. It's vacuum operated and it flows through with the hot, I'm going to call it coolant, the hot water that goes through to the heater core, and it controls that operation. You can see the part number. I just simply call it a control valve. If you are trying to locate this valve, it is under the hood, in front of the passenger's, I'll call it in front of the passenger's feet, up high underneath the air cleaner assembly. You'll need to get some 10mm nuts removed from that air cleaner assembly, and one particular vent hose that is under the passenger side of that air filter assembly, and remove that. It lifts out quite easily. Just a couple of 10mm bolts, as I said, nuts, as I said. And you'll see this valve, it's deep against the firewall, and this is a new one. We'll open it up and we'll take a look to see how it operates. And I'll show you with some vacuum in just a moment. Okay, so its normal position, as you can see when you look through, its normal position is open. So if it were to fail and not be able to operate and you couldn't get vacuum, it should be open and allowing hot water to pass through. Now the good news is if it fails, you have access to heat. The bad news, by turning on the blower. The bad news is if it fails and it's summertime, you will be getting hot water through the heater core. So this is the off and on position, and it's simply vacuum operated by a little diaphragm in here. It's a very simple valve, all plastic, and has hose clamps on either side of this for the fluid, and a vacuum line that comes from just behind the brake vacuum booster on the driver's side, with a four-way connector, as I recall. Check me on that. So I'm going to attach a small vacuum line to the pin on the back. See if I can get it to take hold enough to draw a vacuum. I keep lots of little segments of tubing around for projects like this, so that when it needs an adaptation, I try to keep something handy. So what we'll do is we'll use our vacuum pump and we'll look at the operator of it, and I'll pull some vacuum and you'll see it just slice shut, and then I can release the vacuum by removing the hose. But you've got the idea of the vacuum actuation. And of course, if you have one of these, you want to pull it and then make sure that it holds vacuum, so that you are indeed getting a good seal, and and that the diaphragm in here is good. And I'll pull it loose back to atmosphere. One more time, a little push to get us some vacuum line on here, and you can see through. I'll hit it with a little bit of vacuum. There we go, and open and close. Simple as that. The plastic fitting. I hope that's helpful to you. And this is high on the firewall side, engine bay firewall side of above the where the passenger's feet would go. But it's up pretty high, but it's very close into the firewall, so it's a little tricky to get your hands to it. I was able to test mine using a vacuum line in place, and be able to test it to make sure that it's opening and closing. The rest of the heating, air conditioning, ventilation flapper system, I'll call it, flap system, directional control of air, originates its vacuum at the same four-way connector in front of the vacuum booster above the brake, at the brake's master cylinder. And that four-way then sends vacuum down to a plenum in the under the dash, and it's down low. It's accessed from the plate that covers next to the driver's right foot. The plate covers a section that has a series of color tubes that are very small, very, very small, and they can be accessed. And what we actually did was we cut them where we could get to them and ran this same vacuum pump to pull vacuum on each of those. And in this car that we were working on, 3 of the, I think there's 7 vacuum operated valves that move the dampers up and back. 3 of the 7 I pulled 0 vacuum on. When I pulled vacuum, they wouldn't hold any vacuum. So I've got some work to do in the dash for the diverter system. But if the AC is running and blowing cold and you don't have heat, it could be that this valve is stuck in the closed position, in which case what I would say is to test it, pull it to the open position, and so that would be pulling it to the open position, tie it off, or make sure that it stays in the open position, which is the pin extended from the vacuum diaphragm, and then try to run the heat. That would be some troubleshooting. I hope that's helpful.